New Orleans has a heartbeat, not the kind you dance to, but the kind that lingers in the walls of old buildings. A slow, wet, echoing thump. Like the city itself remembers things it shouldn't and refuses to forget. On the edge of the Treme, just past the neon lie of Bourbon Street, there's a forgotten building that leans like it's tired of standing. 3 stories, peeling paint like it's shedding skin, a front gate that groans like it's in pain when you open it, if you can. That's where she lives. Apartment 1A, ground floor, by the boiler room that never works right. Her name is Leah, just Leah. No last name on the mailbox, no lights on after dark, no pets, no plants, and most of all, no voice. Nobody hears her speak. Nobody really sees her. She's like smoke in a hallway, there, then gone. Thin, plain, quiet, not quiet like shy, quiet like deliberate, like silence is a shield. Every day she walks to the corner grocery store 3 blocks away. She works the night shift, always night, folding receipts, stocking shelves, cleaning what others left behind. She walks home just before sunrise, eyes down, hood up, bag in hand, no earbuds, no phone, just alone. People don't talk to Leah, not out of cruelty, out of habit. They've already decided who she is. That strange woman. Probably something wrong with her. Maybe a runaway. Maybe worse. Maybe just broken. But if you watch closely, and nobody ever did, you'd see her look up at apartment 3B. Only 3B, only once, every single night. That's where Mr. Maris lived. No one called him by his first name. No one really wanted to. He was one of those men who smelled like mold and cigarettes, who coughed like he was trying to spit out a demon. The kind of man who used to be something, but no one remembers what. Thick hands, yellow teeth, always yelling at the TV. He never left the building, but he knew everything about everyone, and he made sure they knew he knew. He'd call Leah Ghost Girl when she passed by. "Hey, Ghost Girl, boo!" And then he'd laugh, hacking up whatever kept him alive. Leah never looked at him, not directly, but she always paused. Not in fear, not in confusion. Something else, a stillness, like she was listening for something beneath his voice. Then she'd keep walking, down the hall, into her room, lock the door. Nights passed like that, years maybe, no one knows, until the day the smell started. Thick, metallic, like old pennies in hot water. Someone called the super called the cops, and the cops found nothing. No Mr. Maris, no note, just a half-eaten sandwich, 3 open beer cans, and a mess on the floor that smelled like time had finally caught up. The next morning, the building was buzzing. "He ran off," someone said. "Feds probably got him," said another. "Maybe he finally croaked," whispered the girl upstairs. But Leah just sat by her window, not waiting, not worried, watching, as if she knew something no one else did. The building was quiet after Mr. Maris vanished, quieter than it had any right to be. No shouting through the floorboards, no static TV echoing from the 3rd floor. Just silence, heavy, wet, unbreathable. Tenants whispered when they passed his door. Some avoided the 3rd floor altogether. No one checked the mailbox. Even the super hesitated before unlocking it for the 2nd time. But Leah, she started going up, 1 step at a time. No sound but the creak of her foot on old wood. She never knocked, never tried the knob, just stood in front of 3B, listened, breathed, and then turned away. The others thought it was grief, some twisted version of guilt maybe, but Leah didn't grieve. Leah was waiting. On the 12th night after Maris disappeared, the hallway light flickered out, and Leah didn't go to work. First time in years. She didn't call in, didn't leave a note, just stayed inside. That night, someone heard her door open, footsteps on the stairs, 3 knocks on apartment 3B. Soft, steady, and then the door opened. Only one other person claims to have seen it, an old woman who feeds the pigeons by the fire escape. She swears she saw Leah step inside, says she saw the door close behind her, but she never saw it open again. Not that night, not for weeks. The city kept moving. It always does. Hurricanes, murders, parades. New Orleans doesn't stop for ghosts, but ghosts, they linger. And something about that building started to change. Tenants reported power surges. The water in the pipes ran red for a day, then clear again. A priest came once, just passing through, felt something near the stairwell, left before the sun set. No one talked about it, no one dared. Until one morning, 2 months after Maris vanished, apartment 3B was listed as available for rent. Fresh coat of paint, locks changed, as if nothing had happened. The ad went live at 7:14 a.m. By 8:09, someone had already signed the lease. A man, young, corporate type, slick shoes, expensive watch, no patience. He moved in the next day, and within 36 hours he was gone. Left his wallet, his keys, even his phone, but not a trace of him anywhere. That's when rumors turned into rules. No one goes to 3B. No one talks about it. No one asks questions. But Leah never came back. Not to the store, not to her room, not to the stairs or the hallway, or the city. Until one day, years later, a girl on the bus saw someone watching her through a fogged-up window of the building. She said it was a woman, pale, still, with eyes too calm for the chaos around her. She didn't smile, didn't wave, but she saw her, and that's how the story starts. Not with a death, not with a scream, but with a woman no one knew, who turned out to be the only one who ever understood what was buried under apartment 3B. The rain didn't stop for 6 days. Not a thunderstorm, not a flood. Just that soft, dragging drizzle, the kind that seeps into your bones and whispers old names you'd rather forget. It started the day after the man vanished from 3B, and it didn't touch any other part of the block. Just that building, just those walls. Inside, something was shifting. Tenants reported scratching, soft, subtle, like the drag of a fingernail beneath tile. One woman swore her mirror fogged up at midnight, even though her water heater was broken. Another found her dog staring at the third-floor stairs, shaking. Just shaking. But the landlord didn't believe in ghosts. He raised the rent, and the building swallowed silence whole. 3 floors down, in the apartment that once belonged to Leah, a maintenance worker discovered something unusual. Behind the radiator, an envelope, sealed in wax. No name, no return address. Inside, a single photograph, grainy, almost faded, but there was no doubt who it was. Leah, standing in the hallway outside 3B, but the door behind her, it wasn't shut. It was wide open, and in the shadows of the apartment behind her stood a second figure. Not Maris, not the man who vanished. Someone else, someone taller, wrapped in something that didn't quite look like cloth, something that shimmered at the edges. The photo was dated, 3 years before Leah ever moved in. The worker turned it in. The super burned it, said he didn't want to deal with curses or lawsuits. But 2 weeks later, his wife was found outside the building, staring at the bricks, barefoot, mumbling the same phrase again and again. It wasn't meant to be buried. It wasn't meant to be buried. She never spoke again. People say buildings remember things. They soak it up. The laughter, the pain, the arguments at 3 a.m., the secrets whispered between floorboards. Some buildings, they rot from the inside out. And apartment 3B had begun to stink. Not literally, but spiritually, like the air was rotting. There were reports of hallucinations. One tenant, a nurse, claimed she saw a little boy standing at the end of her bed at night. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there until she blinked, and then he was gone, leaving behind the smell of wet earth. A researcher heard about it, folklore professor from Tulane, Dr. Edwin Clay. He showed up one afternoon in a tweed coat too heavy for the season, asking for access to floor plans. He was polite, but persistent. He got what he wanted. And 2 days later, he published an anonymous forum post titled, "There's a body under apartment 3B. The post was only up for 12 hours. It was taken down by morning. But it said enough. The building was constructed on top of a 19th century cemetery, but not a public one. Not for citizens. It was a private graveyard for the asylum patients of Saint-Germain. No records of transfer, no exhumations, just concrete poured over corpses. Apartment 3B sits directly above what was once called the pit. They buried the dangerous ones there, the forgotten ones, the ones who swore they could see the future, and who never, ever screamed. No one wanted to believe it, but then someone dug, late at night, quietly. They only went a few inches deep behind the building, near the rusted old drain pipe. But they found something. Not a bone, not a skull. Something worse. A ring, engraved, still warm, as if someone had just removed it. The inscription was clear. To LG, see you on the other side. No one knew who LG was, until someone remembered Leah's full name. Leah Granger. The next day, the windows on the 3rd floor began fogging from the outside. The lights blinked, even when no power outage was recorded. And in the lobby, for just 1 hour, the old mailboxes rattled in unison, as if something was moving through them, searching. Someone called a priest, but the moment he stepped through the front door, his nose began to bleed. He never made it to 3B. That's when someone remembered the pigeons. They hadn't come back since the day Leah disappeared. And pigeons, they always return. They know where home is. But these, they were gone. As if whatever lived above apartment 3B had rewritten the sky. And still, the city carried on. Still, the building stood. Still, the door to apartment 3B, once open, remained closed. But those who lived there, they began to see Leah again. In dreams, in fogged windows, in the reflection of microwaves. She never spoke, but her eyes, they were no longer sad. They were focused, and behind her, always just behind her, was that same shadow from the photograph. Only now it was moving. Leah Granger was born twice, once to the world, with pain and tears and the sterile smell of a hospital room in Baton Rouge. And once again, in a concrete room with no windows, no clocks, and a voice whispering through the vents, "You were never meant for the surface." That second birth didn't happen in any hospital. It happened in the records that no longer exist. Records burned, altered, forgotten. Because Leah wasn't her real name. Not originally. She was born Leora Gallon, the daughter of a woman who once predicted the governor's death down to the hour, and a man whose job was to erase people like her from the census. Leah never spoke of her childhood, and that was by design. There were experiments, doctors who didn't ask permission, a facility that didn't officially exist. Not anymore. It was known only by initials, ECP, Enhanced Cognitive Processing. On paper, a research institute. In practice, a cage for those who saw too much. Leah wasn't the only one, but she was the youngest to survive their trials. She remembered the lights, the sound they made when they flickered, like a scream pitched too high to hear. She remembered what they tried to teach her, or maybe what they tried to steal, because Leah could do things, strange things. She could walk into a room and tell you what had died there. She could hear a person's voice and know the lie they told themselves the most. She could dream of people she had never met, and then watch them appear in her life 2 days later. They called her a sensitive, a seer, but not in a mystical sense. They said it was cognitive hyperfunction, that her brain processed timelines differently, that her memories of future events weren't supernatural, just a gift of sight most couldn't understand. So they tested her, pushed her, And one night, she made it rain inside the building. Just one room, just for an hour, but it rained blood. The experiment logs were destroyed that same week. And Leah, barely 16, disappeared from every file, photograph, and fingerprint record. They called it a containment failure, but the truth was worse. Leah escaped. For years she hid, took odd jobs, changed her name, pretended to be broken, not mentally but socially, quiet, withdrawn. She smiled at people the way a ghost might smile at its living relatives, faint, disconnected, but she was watching, learning, because she knew something others didn't. The people who buried the gifted never stopped digging, and they were looking for her again. When Leah moved into apartment 3B, it wasn't random. She knew exactly where she was going. She had seen it in a dream she'd had at 13, a dream of a door with peeling green paint, of a floor with 7 scorch marks in the hardwood, of a voice behind the wall saying, "It's not death if they remember your name." Apartment 3B matched every detail, and beneath it, she knew, was the pit. The pit wasn't a myth. She'd read about it in files smuggled out by another escapee, a man named Asa Vale, who died mysteriously 3 months after leaking the documents. It had been part of a hidden asylum beneath the asylum, where those too unstable for healing were placed, not for treatment, not for safety, but for silence. They buried the ones who could not be broken, the ones who whispered too much truth in their sleep. And those whispers, they never really stopped. They echoed, even through concrete, even through time. When Leah arrived, she did 3 things. She replaced the smoke alarm batteries with hand-carved stones she brought from the coast. She painted sigils under every tile in the bathroom. And she never slept in the bed, only in the bathtub, surrounded by salt and iron nails. Because Leah didn't come to apartment 3B to hide. She came to awaken something that had been waiting for her, something she had seen in her dreams since she was 8. And then, the man arrived, the one from upstairs, the one who smiled too easily, who never blinked enough, who always knew when she'd just woken up, even before she opened the door. He wasn't a neighbor. He didn't belong to the building. He never paid rent, but he was always there. She called him the Watcher, and she hated him because he reminded her of someone from ECP, someone who once told her, "If you can see them before they see you, you're not a prophet. You're a threat." The Watcher asked too many questions. He never mentioned Leah by name, but he knew what she was. He called her the last light, and he said it like a warning. She thought about running again. She packed her bag, left everything behind. But when she turned to leave, the door wouldn't open. It was unlocked, but it would not open, no matter how hard she pulled. Then she heard the scratching, not on the door, but under the floorboards. And in that moment, she knew the pit had awakened, not because she summoned it, but because it had always been waiting for her. The floor beneath Leah's feet groaned like something exhaling after a long, bitter sleep. The scratching had stopped. Now there was a silence, dense and ancient, that didn't just fill the room, it pressed against it, like the air itself was remembering something it wasn't meant to, something it had been sworn to forget. Leah didn't move. Her hand hovered near the doorknob, not to escape anymore, but to feel if the temperature would change. It had once, in the asylum, right before a girl named Esther had exploded into flame without a match or a scream. And now, just like then, the metal was cold as ice, the kind of cold that burns. She took one breath, then she stepped forward, not away from the scratching, but toward it. The floorboards in the kitchen had always looked off, darker, warped, humming faintly when she passed over them barefoot, like they remembered something being buried beneath. Now they were lifting, one by one, as if something beneath the building had started to breathe again. Long, slow inhales that made the walls pulse in rhythm. And then came the voice, not a man's, not a woman's, not human. It was the sound of something that hadn't spoken in decades. Your name was not theirs to erase. Leah froze. Her real name, the one her mother used only once, right before she was taken. Leora. Your name is a key. The floorboards splintered open. What lay beneath wasn't dirt, wasn't stone. It was obsidian, glass, and in it, reflections, not hers, but versions of herself, in hundreds of lives, hundreds of timelines. A woman in armor, a child holding a burning book, an old woman with glowing hands, a mother, a warrior, a queen. All of them her, all of them waiting. She dropped to her knees. The glass was cold, but it didn't cut. It welcomed her. And when she placed her palms against it, the reflections began to speak in unison. They feared you because you remembered. That's when she saw it, the watcher, standing at the threshold of the broken kitchen. But his face was wrong, melting, not from heat, but from truth. His features shimmered, shifted. His smile peeled open too wide, his eyes losing all color. And then he said it. You were never supposed to find this place. Leah stood, no more shaking, no more fear, only memory, not just of what they had done to her, but of what she had been before they stole it. The experiments had never awakened her. They'd tried to suppress her, unsuccessfully. She was born awake. She walked toward the watcher, barefoot, calm. Every step made the glass hum louder behind her. You're not afraid, he whispered. I was, she said, when I thought I was alone. He lunged at her, too fast to see, but when his hands reached her shoulders, he vanished, disintegrated, not into dust, but into memory, faded like a page too long exposed to the sun, because he was never truly there. He was a failsafe, a fragment, a shadow ECP had left behind to keep her from ever reaching the truth. And now that she had touched it, the truth made him irrelevant. The apartment groaned again, but this time it wasn't decay, it was awakening. Behind her, the pit of glass had begun to shift, the reflections moving toward one point, coalescing into a single figure, tall, radiant, clothed in shadow and light. She couldn't see its face, but she knew what it was, a reminder of who she had been, of what had been buried to keep her tame. A voice filled the room, not from the reflection, but from inside her own chest. You are not broken. You are sealed. Leah dropped to her knees, not from weakness, but reverence. And as the figure stepped through the surface of the glass, now a gate, not a grave, the world shivered. The walls cracked. The ceiling bled light. Apartment 3B no longer existed on any map, because it had become the threshold, the beginning, the forgotten origin of a woman who had once been hidden, and who now finally remembered her crown. They never expected her to rise, not from the silence, not from the trauma, and certainly not from the grave they had built so carefully beneath apartment 3B. The world outside kept moving. Cars rolled by. People scrolled, slept, and aged. But time had fractured. In that moment, in that apartment, in that truth, time stopped obeying. Because Leah was no longer a name. She was a return, the return of something ancient, misnamed and misplaced for generations, buried under medicine, misdiagnosis, mockery, called crazy, called dangerous, called a subject. But she had never been a patient. She had been a lockbox, a sealed vault, not containing trauma, but power. And they had kept her small because they knew what would happen if she remembered who she was. The mirror of obsidian was gone. In its place, a pool of light, not bright, not blinding, just true. And from that pool rose not fire, not vengeance, but names, whispers of others who had been sealed, children who heard voices and were silenced, women who burned too hot and were sedated, Men who dreamed too vividly and were erased. She heard them, everyone, and she answered, "I see you. You are not broken. You were buried." The walls of the apartment softened, almost sighing in release. Leah stood in the center, no longer shaking, no longer alone. She had been the test, but now she was the signal. The institutions began to fall, quietly at first, unnoticed. A file lost, a camera feed erased, a doctor resigning suddenly, muttering about dreams he couldn't stop having. Locations sealed off, codes no longer recognized, because the system was connected to her. Her awakening was like a virus they hadn't coded against. But it wasn't destruction she brought, it was disruption. The kind that makes the world ask itself, what else have we buried? Leah didn't seek revenge. She didn't need to. She walked the streets again, but people moved now when she passed. Not out of fear, out of instinct, as if something in their bones knew that the one who had been discarded, forgotten, ridiculed, was royalty, not in blood, not in title, but in truth. She had survived every attempt to erase her. And now, she wasn't just surviving. She was remembering others, calling them, lifting them, one by one, until the silence of buried voices was broken. Permanently. It didn't end with a scream, or a flash of light, or a courtroom verdict. It ended with a chair, an old one, in the middle of the apartment. Leah sat, not as a queen, not as a hero, but as a witness. The room, now stripped of shadows, breathed with her. The wallpaper, once peeling, now shimmered with faint impressions of those who had been silenced here. They weren't gone. They were present, held in memory. In her memory. She closed her eyes not to retreat, but to reach deeper, beyond the trauma, beyond the systems, beyond language, into something older than all of it. She reached into the pulse beneath the city, beneath us, and there she found roots, twisting through history, wrapped around the bones of forgotten genius, hidden children, silent prophets. The lost were not lost. They were planted, waiting for someone like Leah to rise. A knock came at the door. Software. Unsure. She stood and opened it. A young girl, maybe 9, quiet, eyes too old for her face, holding nothing but a notebook and a black crayon. Leah smiled. "I saw you," the girl said, "in a dream." "I know," Leah replied. And with that, she stepped aside and let the girl in. They weren't forming a movement, or a rebellion, or a cult. They were forming memory, living memory, repaired memory. And from that memory would rise a new kind of world. Not louder, not faster, but truer. A world where the whisperers were not medicated into silence, where the watchers were not locked away, where the ones with flames in their hands were taught to build, not burn. The chair remained in the center of the room, empty now, but never forgotten, because that chair once held the weight of someone who was told she was nothing, and it remembered what it felt like when she finally realized she was everything. So if you ever walk past apartment 3B and the air feels heavier, wiser, like it's watching you, don't be afraid. It's not a ghost. It's a reminder that even in the deepest grave, beneath the most ordinary floorboards, something sacred might be waiting to awaken.
Every story leaves a mark, big or small. If this one meant something to you, take a second to share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. More stories are waiting for you. See you soon.